Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Interpretingtradition. I have a video that is quite a few people are following. Normally in my channel I read both in Spanish and English translations by my mystic. I call him my mystic because it's a Franciscan friar from the 16th century, but in translating his works into English, I have lived with him for so long that I call him my guy. And I am reading my translations and so on, but I do have a number of videos. Sometimes I take a break from all that reading, and I have a series of chats when I just talk about whatever I have read something and it has brought back to my mind some things, and it's sort of reminiscences of when I was a child and so on. So both of you who follow me know that I was raised in an orphanage by nuns, and so in looking at the world as it is now, I think I call it um, memories from a world that's long gone, that no longer exists, or something like that. And inevitably, it takes me back to my childhood and see the difference of the world I lived, which was it was in the 1950s, and it was pretty much a place where, it could have been in the 19th century, and the world as it is today. And inevitably, I have to go back to some experiences in my childhood. And so I have some chats on that, and also on quotes from different authors that I have enjoyed, that have influenced me, Dostoevsky, many others. And the last video I did was because I saw on YouTube a little controversy about the Pope having put up a tweet, and tweet, sorry, it's my Spanish. and Dr. Jordan Peterson, who replied to it, and there has been a little bit of a controversy there, and then Dr. TaylorMarshall discussing it and suggesting that perhaps Dr. Peterson was wrong, or at least he didn't take into account a lot of other things, and he discusses that. I do follow Dr. Marshall, actually. I admire him. I know he's a scholar. So I am in this position where I have to disagree with him. The first time that I disagree with scholars was when I was 8 years old. Bear with me because I'm going to deal with this, and it will be the last video I do on this controversy. I do not intend to put myself there on display because I lack a lot of knowledge. I'm not a theologian and so on. All I can do is to discuss this controversy based on not any particular knowledge that I might have, but on the seeds of Catholicism that the nuns implanted in me in my most formative years, when I was a child and an adolescent. That is all I have. And based on those seeds, I have never studied theology or anything like that, but based on those seeds, I'm going to discuss this, what Dr. Marshall addresses about justice and works and so on. Excuse me, every time I start talking, I start coughing. I don't know why. I think it's nerves. But anyway, the first time that I addressed scholars and theologians was when I was 8. In the orphanage one day, someone came and said, there's going to be a competition about the catechism. Who wants to take part in it? And I volunteered for everything, and I said, me. Okay, So you had to study the catechism. There were two that I remember. One was a very tiny little booklet, and it was up to the age of 8 inclusive. And then, and it was a little tiny book with blue edges. And then from 9 to, I don't know what, perhaps 12, something like that, with watch a little bit thicker, was a little bit thicker with red edges. Anyway, I was studying the first one. It was very tiny. So I studied that. No one guided me. No one said, okay, go and study or anything else. I just did it. And the competition was that you would be asked questions from the catechism and you had to give the exact answers. You couldn't add one word or forget another. It had to be exactly as it was written. That was the competition. And on top of that, they would ask you a question that you hadn't prepared, a passage from the New Testament. And they would ask you what happened, and then you would have to, what was that? And you had to tell the story of how it happened and what it meant and so on. So anyway, so first of all, one day a nun just came and said, okay, this is the time that the competition is on. So they took me somewhere, okay, and I won. It was the parish competition. The orphanage was part of this particular parish, and so I won. First prize, great. And then I didn't know all this. I was this, and then I had to compete against the whole province, all the parishes of the province. The province was La Coruña. This is in northwestern Spain. You know where Compostela, Santiago de Compostela, St. James, the Camino, and all that. Well, that is part of the province of La Coruña, although nowadays it's the capital of the whole region, Galicia, in the northwestern part of Spain, above Portugal, if you can. All right. So then I had to compete with all the parishes of that particular province. And I won. Yay. Okay. And then the third competition was among all the parishes of the whole region of Galicia. And I didn't win. I got third prize there. But I remember, I'll tell you more about it, but I remember that they asked me the questions from the catechism and I replied. And then the question from the Bible was to explain the wedding at Cana. I remember. So there I was, a tiny little girl of 8 years old, and I was explaining, the panel was the Archbishop of Compostela was there, the bishop, priests, nuns, there was a huge panel there, and there I was explaining to them what it all meant. And I do remember that I explained about the miracle and the wine and so on, and then I said, but one thing to take into account here, it's very important, is the role of the Virgin Mary, because she came to Jesus and said, they have no wine. She did, and I explained to them, she didn't say, oh, please do a miracle here, look what is happening. No, she just, statement of fact, they have no wine. So she left it up to him. Whatever he decided, I explained to them, in case they didn't know. She left it up to him. And I explained about the humility of the Virgin and so on. So this was, by the way, no, I didn't. They took it serious. I didn't see anyone laughing or smiling or anything. You know, they were actually listening to me, and I just went on and on explaining. All right, so then the nuns were good enough to come and tell me that one of the priests in the panel came to them saying, you know, this little girl really actually won. But she has a lot of privileges, being formally educated by nuns and so on. And we thought that we should give the first prize to a little girl who comes from the village. And she doesn't have all the resources and so on. So we just thought it was the right thing to do. So they were good enough to explain it to me, so I didn't feel so disappointed. I said, okay. So here I am, like 65 years later, taking on 2 scholars and the Pope. All right. Dr. Marshall, who is a doctor of theology, and Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's a doctor, a scholar of psychology or psychiatry. I don't know. But anyway, they're highly learned individuals. And as I said, all I have to go by is what I had learned when I was 8. I have written some notes so I don't lose my train of thought here. So what I know about the faith are the fruits derived from these seeds. I'm sure not ripe yet as they should, but in any case, as I understand what I'm going to talk about. I will get to the point, but I want to give you a sort of an explanation, a preamble, an introduction, if I can put it that way. And you will be able to see why I have reached this conclusion, that Dr. Peterson is right and that Dr. Marshall has misunderstood Dr. Peterson. Not that what he says is incorrect, although I'm going to question something, but he has misunderstood him. There are 2 passages, so bear with me, please. There are 2 passages in the books that I have translated from my mystic, Fray Juan de los Ángeles, this mystic from the 16th century. His books, there is one particular book that I have read, which is based on the Song of Songs, and his theme is taken, well, it's based on the Song of Songs, that marvelous book that has influenced so many mystics. And his theme in the book, the spiritual and loving struggle between God and the soul, is taken from the Old Testament, from the fight, the struggle that Jacob had with the angel. And based on the Song of Songs, he says, he refers to one passage in the Song of Songs. You wounded me, the spouse talking to his beloved, the soul. You wounded me with one of your eyes and a strand of your hair. And Fray Juan goes on to explain the meaning of this one eye. Why this emphasis on one eye and one strand of hair? Because when he then, in the Canticle of Canticles, when then he goes on to speak of both eyes, as it were, and in that sense, the spouse flees away. And Fray Juan, let me get it here for you. From the Song of Songs is, you wounded my heart, my dear sister, my spouse. You wounded my heart with one eye and a strand of your hair. And that is, this is in his own words. The actual quote is, thou hast wounded my heart, my sister, my spouse. Thou hast wounded my heart with one of thy eyes and with one hair of thy neck. Canticles 4:9. And he goes on to explain the meaning of the one eye, and then he says almost immediately later, he says, he will plead that she look away. Turn away thy eyes from me, for they have made me flee away. And he goes on, he has a whole chapter on this, and he concludes that you can look at God. This is in an anagogic, mystical sense, okay, figuratively speaking. You can look at God with one eye or with both. And he explains it very well. And then he says, what I understand here is that there is one way of looking at him that bewitches and captivates his heart, and another that makes him turn away and flee. And so it is that when he confesses to being wounded, it is always when he is looked at with one eye. And when he shows himself displeased is when he is looked at with both. It is with the shy look of one eye, reader, that we captivate him. It is with the effrontery of two that we drive him into exile. All right, so at the same time, I'm following on this. He says, he gives us a little anecdote about Brother Giles. Brother Giles was a Franciscan friar who lived in the same monastery with Father Bonaventure, Saint Bonaventure afterwards. And Brother Giles was not, what you might say, very bright. He wasn't the sharpest knife, as the saying goes, in the drawer. And one day he's talking to Father Bonaventure, and he says, Father, can an imbecile like me love as much as a learned man? Because he had said, Father Bonaventure, clever people have really received a great gift from God, haven't they? But what can we do, we stupid people who know nothing? Can an imbecile like me really love God as much as a learned man? Brother Giles, Father Bonaventure replied. Can a little old grandmother love as much as a doctor of theology? And so Brother Giles, not being very bright, understood this, and he, well, literally, and he went out and went up the hill and started shouting, hey there, little old grandmothers everywhere who know nothing. If you love God, you will be just as holy as Father Bonaventure. The meaning this anecdote is for Fray Juan here to tell us that there are different ways of knowing God. And then it goes on to what the mystics always say, not only the mystics, but doctors of theology, when they talk about the physical body, yes, and then the intellect, and then the heart. The intellective faculty of the soul and the affective side, different ways of knowing God. And that the intellect may not be sufficient. He says in some place, that's why we have so many scholars and so few saints, I suppose, he says. So we have the body, the mind, and the soul, or the will, yeah? Okay, so there are, let's say, two ways of knowing God. And what I want to move on to saying this. Look, God incarnated in the second person. Yes, the three, the Trinity, obviously played a role in the incarnation. Only the second, the Son, incarnated, as if God was saying, I know you have known me from the Old Testament. You knew of my majesty, my omnipotence, and you feared me. But I don't want you to come to me because you fear me. I want you to come to me because you love me. Keep this in mind, because I'm going to tie it up later to several things. One second point, still I'm not dealing with the issue of Dr. Peterson and the Pope and Dr. Marshall, but as I said, bear with me. As a translator, I have been translating the mystics for a while, and in one other video, and this is connected, in one other video I talk about what it's like to translate the mystics and the difficulties there, and so on. And I discuss language a little bit. And one of the things that I discuss is the word, the Latin word sanitas, salutem, salutarum, salus, and so on, that to the Spanish translate, it's the same word, salud. In English, health. And I find that in the Spanish, translated from the Latin, the word salud follows naturally, and it is always understood in a spiritual context. And my difficulty as a translator to just say health, because I don't know whether it's me, but in English, the word health does not necessarily automatically take us to the spirit, to spiritual health. And so I'm having to sometimes use spiritual health, spiritual well-being. In other words, the word health meaning bring us back to health, renewing, renovating, healing. And the difficulty is that what I see in the Bible, I'm using the Vulgate, Reims edition. This word is always translated as salvation. And salvation, as we know, can have different meanings. In salvation, you go to heaven kind of thing. But to save from is a different thing. You can save someone from drowning. You can save someone from doing something, that kind of thing. When you translate the Latin or the Spanish salud immediately into salvation, it may have different connotations, meaning that you go straight to heaven instead of healing and renewing. And so that was one of the difficulties I discussed. The other one was is the word works. And because I am not a theologian, I think I'm missing something here, because I know that this thing about faith and works is a major, has been and it continues to be a major problem, discussed forever, for centuries, among theologians and so on. And in my unlearned way, I couldn't see why this problem with faith and works, and I point to the word conduct, and I explained that in the Spanish, which is very close to the Latin, works is translated as conduct. Now, conduct, we have that word in English. We also have behavior. And I explained that the two words are different. behavior is what you do and how you do it. Yes, acts. Yes, or the way you act and so on. The word conducta in Spanish is, I think it has a deeper meaning. It's a normal word for us. We use it as naturally as you use behavior, to behave and so on. But it's not a literary or a spiritual word. This is a normal word, like chair or table, normal word. And the word conducta, conduct, means who you are and what you believe in, who you are as a person, which necessarily translates and manifests itself into what you do. The two things are not disassociated. Obviously, what you believe, who you are as a person, manifests itself into what you do and how you do it. I don't see how you can separate the two. How can you separate who you are from what you do? If that is the interpretation of faith, then it would mean that faith is just here in a box, frozen. Yeah, nothing to do with what you do. They cannot be separated. They have to be together. So I didn't understand. I'm obviously missing something because I know that theologians have been arguing this for centuries. So I'm missing something, but I don't know what it is that I'm missing because I don't see how you can disassociate faith from what you do. Now, when you translate conduct into works, that tends to take you to specific things. You know, you go or you don't go to visit prisoners in prison, or you feed or you not feed the hungry. Acts themselves specific, whereas this is a much more general thing, conduct. All right. So what I watched Dr. Marshall's video, and he responds to Dr. Peterson, and in reference to what the Pope said, his emphasis on social justice. And he asks Dr. Peterson, is saving one's soul antithetical to justice? Of course not. And of course he goes on. He's saying to, if I understand him correctly, he's saying to Dr. Peterson, you cannot disassociate faith from works, from what you do. And he quotes from the Bible in Matthew 25, I was thirsty and you gave me not to drink, I was hungry and you gave me not to eat, etc. And then, as long as you did not to one of the least, the poor, the vulnerable, neither did you do it to me. And then also refers to James and faith and works. And I would say that this works is your conduct. Anyway, what I find, and this is where I tend to disagree with Dr. Marshall, only in the sense that I think he misunderstood what Dr. Peterson was trying to say. In your work, in your conduct, it seems to me that you have to be focused very much on God, on Him first. If not, be very careful. If you take away God, Him, it may take you, your works or your conduct, into another path. It might take you, Okay, we have two principal loves, two ways of behaving. One is the path of God here, and another one is the path of the self. These two loves are the principal loves, and everything else we love and everything else we have affection towards or delectation spring from these two other loves. Now, if you take away your eyes from God and you keep it on creatures, not on the creator, but on its creation alone, it might take you into a path of concentrating solely on the person when you do an act of charity, for example. It might take you into the person itself. In other words, when I do something good for others, I understand it to be that I am focusing on God, and because of love for Him, I am going to love my fellow creatures because they are His creation, but my eyes are on Him. I do it because of Him first, which necessarily is going to manifest. If I love Him, I'm going to love one of His creatures. But if we take Him away from the picture and I just concentrate on the person, I'm going to do the right thing for this person and that person. Be careful, because you might end up trying to win brownie points there. Hey God, yeah, okay, look what I'm doing. I'm doing this. I'm doing this good work. You're trying to, don't forget to write it down in your notebook. Look at all the things I am doing. If you don't do it because of Him, if you take Him out of the picture, you're just doing acts in order to say to Him, look what I'm doing. I say be careful, because that might end up in vanity. Don't know whether I explained this properly. Remember the Pharisee? I do this and I do that and I help the poor and so on and so forth. Okay, so at the end you're doing it for yourself, so that you may do a good act, so that you may earn a brownie point. Don't remind God of your brownie points. You have to first of all do it for Him, just because of Him, and that will take you necessarily into doing the right thing for others. Then Dr. Marshall goes on to explain the difference. He's trying to remind Dr. Peterson that faith and works. Remember what I said about conduct. Okay, so he's trying to, or he says, I think, that because Dr. Peterson might be of a perhaps Protestant, we don't know, I don't know, or perhaps of living within a Protestant culture, that he might be putting too much emphasis on faith alone, or even on me, because Dr. Peterson said something about the soul, my redemption of my soul, or something like that. And Dr. Marshall says, well, you're putting too much emphasis on me, your soul, your soul, your soul. And he reminds him, but remember, it's not just you, the individualism of your culture, but actually doing things for others works, and so. But I think that this is a misunderstanding of what Dr. Peterson is saying. He alludes to the Protestant culture and faith alone, and the individualism of many countries on concentrating on me, and he suggests that is not enough. You have to uh, extend yourself to do something for others, in other words, love for others, and so on. And as I said, I think this is a misunderstanding. I know practically nothing about Protestant denominations. I know this about faith alone. Now I'll tell you a story. I tell you how much I knew about Protestantism. One day we were complaining to this nun about this, that, or the other, and she said, "This is an old nun," and she said, "Always complaining and protesting about everything. You're going to become Protestants." I don't think she knew very much either. So an old nun, and we were little, and we said, "What is Protestant, sister?" And she said, "Oh, that's Martin Luther." She says, "He left the church and he went off and found another new church." Really? Yes, that's what he did. He found his own church. Imagine that. She says, uh, he was German, from Germany. Oh. I feel like doing that sometimes with this synod of synodality, of synodism, whatever it is that they call themselves. Anyway, um, and she said, and he was a priest too, and a monk. And oh, and then we said, "Sister, shall we pray for Martin Luther?" No, no, we said, is Martin Luther in hell then? And she said, "Oh, I don't know where he is." "Is he in purgatory?" "I don't know where he is. Why do you keep asking me where he is? I don't know. Only the good Lord knows that. Although knowing the good Lord, he's probably gone and forgiven him too." That's what he does. Forgive, forgive, forgive. Oh, dear Lord, you have the patience of Holy Job. She said, ah, so one of them said, "Well, sister," we were all 8-year-old. "Sister, shall we pray for the soul of Martin Luther, just in case he's in purgatory?" "If we must," she said. So that is the extent of what I know about Protestantism and all the different denominations. I've learned a little bit more, but not very much. So I think that by Dr. Marshall, by speaking about what Dr. Peterson said, putting it directly onto the Protestant thing of only thinking of faith and not works is incorrect. As I said, I told you this story just to tell you that I don't know very much at all about Protestantism. But let's talk about what the Pope says about social justice. Now, we know that social justice is being used today in political terms by many as a sort of a political, what we call now, woke ideology. Does it have to do with justice? Does it have to do with forgiveness? Does it have to do with resentment? Does it have to do with revenge? Justice, as I understand it, is not just distribution. The communist said, to each, from each according to his ability and to each according to his needs. Yes, that was distribution. You can say, okay, fair enough. Others answered that by saying, no, from each or to each according to his contribution. And that is a different political way, political ideology. Yeah. When I think of an eye for an eye, I don't think that I don't think the meaning of that was retribution in the sense of revenge or of vengeance. You did this to me, so I will do this to you. But in the sense of um, the punishment has to fit the crime, as it were. Yes. So if you stole my chicken, this would be the retribution, the punishment, and also how you would have to do retribution. If you steal, $1 million, obviously it's a different one, especially from the poor, from those who don't have, and so on. So justice is not just about distribution of something. Okay, think of two extreme examples, if you like. Okay, if you have inherited a great deal of wealth, billions and billions, and I ask you, give a few to this poor mother who's bringing up 5 children in poverty, you would say, well, that is fair, just give a whatever. Think about another example. If you came from nothing and you worked very hard and you labored, and what you have out of the sweat of your labor and your work, you have this, okay? You have accomplished this. Another extreme example, and someone who doesn't have anything is because he hasn't tried, because he's there in his basement playing video games. It would not be just because one has more and the other less, to take from he who labored to give to someone who doesn't even try. That is distribution, but that is not justice. You understand? So justice is more than distribution. And the way social justice is being used these days is distribution. It doesn't have, I don't think it has much to do with being just. I think it has to be more with revenge or resentment in the way it is used these days. Because social justice, what can it be? What can we possibly have against social justice? Nothing. But remember how words are used. Yes? Espionage is called intelligence. The Department of War is called the Department of Defense. And equity in today's political world is more than just equality based on justice. It means equality of outcome, not just of opportunity, but of result. Everyone has to have the same result. And that is not just. So the word social justice, as it is used today in political and social terms, is not what we refer in spiritual sense of justice, natural justice. Now, I stopped writing notes there. So this is going to be too long. I don't know whether I have explained it. Now I'll come back to why this is what Dr. Marshall is explaining about Dr. Peterson only concentrating on one's individual soul. And he's reminding him it's not just you. Obviously, it has to, what you believe has to encompass how you relate to others and so on, which we understand if we understand it as conduct. But I think he misunderstood it, because what Dr. Peterson is doing, I think, is concentrating on this word social justice as it is used today. The woke ideology, yeah. And he says something about your, the redemption or your own soul or something like that. I don't have the quote. It's just one little sentence there. But I think he's referring to social justice as it is used today. And what I think he's saying to the Pope is, Pope, Holy Father, I'm so sorry, I think you have forgotten something here, like God or the divine or the soul. You're concentrating on social justice as it is used today. In other words, he's saying, I think you have forgotten something vital here, which he did, and that is true, because he talks about the abuse of labor and so on. Well, who is abusing the poor and the vulnerable today, Holy Father? Who? The same ones, the ones in power. Your friends, you have them at the Vatican. You have from Bill Gates to everybody else, men, women, amphibians, everybody. And you are trying to get rid of traditional Catholics, hoping that we leave. We're not leaving, we're staying. You seem to be very equitable to everybody else except to those who want to hear the Mass of the ages, the Mass as it was said for 2,000 years. Why? The one thing that he forgot in his tweet was the environment. He's always talking about the environment. So I'll have to do another video on that. But what Dr. Peterson is reminding the Pope is that he's concentrating on the physical now and not on the divine. Of course, in one little sentence, he doesn't want to go into it, but I don't think that Dr. Peterson was saying just me, my soul, my soul. He's too intelligent and he's too spiritually sensitive to make that mistake. That is not what he was doing. He was reminding the Pope that all these things that he talks about have to be with reference to God, not to reference to just man. Okay, I think I'll finish there. If I think of other things, I will do another video. Probably not. I think I'll leave it there. I hope it has made sense. I rambled a bit, but there you are. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.